And welcome into the GenWealth Radio Hour. And if you're watching online, welcome to you as well. My name is Scott Inman, an advisor at GenWealth Financial Advisors out of the West Little Rock office. And co-hosting with me today is Teresa Arago out of the Conway office as we get ready for the What's Happening segment, not to be confused with the 70s sitcom of the same name.
Because I think people were definitely curious about that. So
People
clarity,
of a certain
we are
age.
not that crew.
Yeah, we actually talked about that right before we went on, and the 20-somethings in the room had no idea what we were talking about.
It's
But
common for
I
me these
remembered
days.
it. Yeah.
There's a lot of things I feel like that I say that the I don't want to call them children, the younger people on our team go, what?
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's happening more and more.
I'm glad it's not just me.
No.
Hey, we've got some good subjects to talk about today. We're going to talk about inflation. We're going to talk about Social Security. But we are going to start with one of those get-rich-quick schemes. Man, I don't know that I should call it a scheme.
It's complex.
It is complex. In fact, I got a little mind-boggled just reading the first slide here. But this is off an Instagram post. The guy's name's Ben Kelly. And you see there, the U.S. government will lend up to $5 million to normal American families to buy boring businesses from retiring boomers. I love the alliteration,
That's a great
too.
title.
Yeah, he worked really hard on that. So you look in the headlines, and this is not a video, so we can't show you the reel, but it's just some slides that he posted. But basically, he talks about how he personally did this, and the concept is you can find a $1 million business that's for sale that's generating $400,000 a year, as an example, and you can use a small business loan to pay for up to $900,000 of that million. So you really only have to come up with $100,000. And then he talks about how he found an investor to put that money up. So basically he's saying you can get into business ownership and high revenue, high cash flow without really putting in your own capital. Now,
Yes.
I'm not going to dispute the facts of this case, okay? What we probably should delve into is the beware nature of it, because I did a little looking into him, and he basically wants to route you to his website, which is called an Acquisition Ace, and there he's going to provide probably a lot of free content, but he wanted me to put in my email, and so that's where I stopped. But I'm sure there's a subscription coming, right,
Yes.
for him to tell you how to do this that he allegedly has done, I think, 7 times now. So I think it's interesting. And I think it may even be true. The facts of the case may be true. I think the problem is it's overly complicated for the average person, and it's a high level of risk to take.
And I think also it ignores the fact that a lot of people don't want to own a business.
Yeah.
There are a good number of people who just the idea of owning a business may not be the right fit for you. Also, are you going to be able to find a business that you're equipped to manage? Like, he makes it sound like these are just all sitting around there. Like, there's part of it said something about there being this large number of boomer-owned businesses that are ready to sell.
Yep.
Where are you going to find this? And then where are you going to find that person willing to put in $100,000 for a little bit of equity?
Yep.
They're taking on 10% of the debt to get some equity. But again, there's so many variables. I agree with you that this could be really unreachable. So I when we saw that website, I was like, okay, he wants to sell coaching.
Right.
And he's doing a good job of making it sound easy-ish. But there's always an agenda.
Yeah. I think that I would not go into any kind of investment opportunity with someone over the internet, first of all, through a website, through a long-distance relationship of coaching, because he talks about evaluating the business, and there were some pretty legitimate reasons or ways that he was going over there on how he wanted to evaluate the business. But are you going to be able to do that? Are you going to be able to do that the same way? And then I thought of time spent, quite frankly, Teresa. I mean, when we compare this to what we do, right, and how we build wealth help our clients build wealth for themselves, the access and the time spent to the stock market is so much easier than the access and time spent to business ownership.
Yes.
And I'm not discounting that for a lot of people, but I'm just saying that we know business owners. We work with business owners.
Yes.
And they work hard. This is not easy. I think it's portrayed as easy.
I agree. I think a lot of people see the success story.
Yeah.
And he does say to go into an established business, but you think about a business that's been around, let's say 10 years, and they've got an established clientele.
Yep.
Well, they're used to that owner and the way that owner
right.
did business. Are you going to meet those needs at the same level? But, people think, oh, this business is fantastic, it's working great, but it's working great for a reason. And are you going to be able to duplicate that once you take over, or is there going to be a bit of a knowledge gap or a client relationship gap to deal with?
Yep.
It's not easy to take over a business. And once you are the business owner, that 40-hour-a-week work week you used to have is officially gone. You're going to be working a lot more than 40 hours a week, and you're going to be dealing with things that you weren't before. So many of our business owners, I have huge respect for our small business owners that we work with, but for many of them, it's actually a little bit more challenging to really prepare for retirement sometimes, because they've got major tax issues to deal with typically. We've got to be really cautious of that, dealing with the different pieces of how to set up an employer plan for a business. There's a lot of nuance to it that if you're not prepared for all of it, you may end up not getting what you were hoping for from a situation like this. And that's not to dissuade you.
Right.
That's just to make sure you're aware of what's out there.
Yeah, from our perspective, we do retirement income planning, and we work with lots of variables, right, in the planning process. And you just outlined so many variables we talked about that are involved with doing what this guy's talking about that would create a bunch of questions. And there are a lot of variables with the planning process as you get closer to retirement. But the reality is the variables are smaller when you're trying to accumulate wealth in the stock market. If you contribute consistently in a growth strategy and work with a pro, you're going to be on your path to financial independence. Not maybe as quickly as if you were successful in doing this route. Maybe this guy's really business savvy. Maybe he's just lucky. But and it might be right for some people, but certainly not all people. So caught our eye. There's a lot of that out there. I'm sure we'll be having that in future What's Happening segments. A lot of people have their ideas about how you can get rich quick, and it always causes us to investigate a little further. All right, so our next piece, or our next subject on What's Happening, is from a Kiplinger article entitled "Inflation is the New Fixed Expense in Retirement. 5 Things that Actually Work to Address It and What Doesn't." So we looked into this.
I love that they're calling it new.
Yeah.
I've been at GenWealth for 13 years. We've been talking about it for 13 years that I've been here, and I know it was on their block before I got here.
Yeah. How often have you done this in planning when we talk about the 3 big risks and you get to inflation and you go, it's not a risk, it's a certainty.
It's just, it's there.
We know it's a fixed expense, and it is not really, I guess the uncertain part of that article is saying it's a fixed expense means it's going to stay the same. It's not. So it's a strange headline. But I mean, the reality is there's a lot of good stuff in this article. I think I'm in agreement with 4 out of the 5 that they talk about. But basically the key takeaway is that it's going to show up. Inflation's going to show up there in your retirement, and you have to have a plan for it. And I love that it says in the article prices don't go backward. That's not going to happen. I think we get confused, or a lot of people get confused when they talk about inflation is cooling. Inflation is lower, and that makes them think inflation is prices are going down. That's just not happening. Inflation cooling just means that the rate of those prices going up is slower than it once was.
Right.
But I actually looked it up off a Google search. So, well, actually,
do with that what you will.
I think it was actually an AI search. So I don't know if that's better or worse. The only time we've had deflation in this country was early 20s, the Great Depression in the 30s, 2009 for only a few months, and in COVID, the first 3 months of COVID, we had deflation, and after that, we haven't had it since.
Interesting.
So you think about that, even in the bad times that do tend to last a lot longer than a few months, we don't see prices go down for very long. So you cannot expect fixed expenses in retirement. You have to have a plan to combat that. And the first thing on the list here was having too much cash. And we know that can be a risk you don't realize you're taking.
Yeah, there's a misperception that I've noticed a lot with people as they're entering retirement. They feel like they have to get more conservative. And you may be in that boat where you feel like, as I approach retirement, I have to be more conservative. I have to be way more conservative. And that's not necessarily true. We use a different approach, and we're going to talk about part of that approach in just a moment. But one of the things we do is we bucket money based on when you're going to need it. The money you're going to need right away, yes, it needs to be conservative. But you're going to be here for a while, hopefully. So we still have to get growth to be able to give you some increases. And so if you're not hearing those conversations from your advisor, that is something to think about, because if they're not planning ahead for inflation to impact you, what are you going to do?
Yeah. And the second one on the list was guaranteed income. increasing potentially your guaranteed income beyond your Social Security check money you can't outlive, how important that is. That fits right into our planning process. We use it we analyze required income amounts and analyze whether there's a required income gap between your expenses that you know you're going to have in retirement and the money that you need coming in on a guaranteed basis. If there is a gap, there are things like annuity products that will provide guaranteed income that will stack on top of that Social Security. So I'm in line with that. The third thing was interesting, how long to hold on to your home. Because when you think about where the inflationary expenses are going to occur, we don't often think about our home. We know if you do have a mortgage, that's fixed. It's not going to go up, but everything else is.
Yes, your taxes, your utilities, all of those are going to adjust. And there are times where for some people it makes sense to stay, but there are times where it makes sense to go, okay, listen, we can't take care of this yard anymore. We can't do these things anymore. It's okay to step away from that if it makes sense for you. But again, if you've got a plan that's providing increases to help you offset that, then there's no rush to change anything there. You can keep your home because you've got the assets to help you through that.
The fourth one is plan for health care. There was an item in the article that said the most dangerous myth is that you'll spend less in retirement. And we have that mentality that we work with oftentimes.
Yes.
Hey, I'm in my go-go years. This is when I want to spend more, and I'm not going to spend anything when I'm in my 80s. If you're perfectly healthy, you might still be traveling, right? So you might still be spending. And if you're not healthy, which is more likely the situation in your 80s, you're going to be spending more on medicine, doctor's visits, all of those types of things, maybe long-term care. So planning for healthcare was number 4, and that's right in line with what we do at GenWealth.
Yes, I talk to people about it being a teeter-totter. You know, your expenses were different, but they just change.
Yep.
You know, you're not going to spend less later on when you talk about inflation and you talk about the other expenses that are coming. It is going to balance itself out a little bit there.
All right, so the last one here is a withdrawal strategy. Disagree with this one a little bit because it says that you should spend more when markets are good and pull back on spending when they are not. Nobody wants to have,
great.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody wants to have an inconsistent income in retirement. You know, I think that's the key piece for me. And we provide a retirement income plan that is consistent and does increase regardless of what is happening in the market at any given moment.
Yes, because of the way we bucket, we don't have to make those in the moment decisions when it comes to your income, and that's really critical. The other thing too is nobody's expenses drop if the market is down. It's not like your utility bill is going to be less because the market's down today. So if you are planning on adjusting your income, good luck. I don't know what else to say. Hopefully the market's never down for you. But having a strategy that allows you to, when the market is up, shave gains and be strategic so that when the market is down, you've captured those gains and not given them back. That's a different conversation than saying, oh, well, I'll just take less money. Think about 2008. If you had $1 million portfolio and you were taking 4%, you were taking $40,000 a year. But when that market dipped and you're now down 40%, if you're still taking 4%, you're walking away with $24,000. Are you really able to afford a $16,000 hit on your income? Of course not.
Yeah,
That's why you can't do that.
And that's where the raises are going to come from. That's where the inflation risk is tackled, is in the bucketing or withdrawal strategy from your assets, because Social Security is not going to keep up. And if you've added to your guaranteed income with something like an annuity, more than likely it's not going to go up. It can, but you can't plan on it going up. So I think that's where you have to have a consistent withdrawal strategy, a retirement income plan to provide that inflation adjusted raise. All right, we are running out of time, but I really want to get to this one, so we may go a little long on the What's Happening segment today. Okay. But this is an article that we get this question a lot in client meeting rooms, but the headline is Big Changes Are Coming to Social Security, Why 2033 is an Important Year and What to Expect Before Then. And we've talked about it before. The Social Security Trust Fund is heading toward depletion. 2033 is now the estimated date, according to the Social Security Administration itself, where the trust fund will run out. So what's going to happen? Well, if nothing happens with regard to legislative reform, if nothing is done by politicians, basically, there would be approximately a 21% reduction in monthly Social Security checks. And that would be across the board. That would be for current recipients and future recipients. Congress has not passed major Social Security reform in over 40 years. So there is a risk that we are going to hit this deadline at the end of 2032 and go into 2033 with a different looking Social Security system. I think that and the article points out that retirees and pre-retirees should plan for two scenarios: current benefit levels that they are projecting or receiving, and reduced benefit scenarios if they don't act. We still continue to believe here that they will act.
Yes.
The fact that we are getting closer to the deadline may discourage some people, but I never thought it was ever going to be anything but the deadline before they did anything.
I think there was a quote, I think it was Winston Churchill, who said the United States always does the right thing at the last moment, right?
Yeah, when all other options are depleted.
Yes.
Right.
I think it's a double-edged sword for politicians, I feel like, because the only way to solve it really short term, which they've done in the past, is to raise taxes for a period of time until they can refund some of that back up. The alternative is they don't do anything and people's income goes down. Both of those are things that none of us like. If we're being honest, none of us like our taxes being increased. None of us really like the idea of Social Security lowering. And so it's a catch-22 for politicians because their one goal is to get reelected. I don't believe, and this is what we've said a million times, I think, at this point, that any politician wants to be the one who let it happen on their watch, who let it go away or lower. It's not going to go away, but if it lowered on their watch, they're not getting reelected.
Right.
So that's the catch-22 that I think it's going to get solved. It's going to probably be taxes would be my guess. I'm not a prognosticator, but that's the only thing I see that could fix it. Or we have to get rid of some of the benefits that it pays for.
Yeah.
So
you could raise the retirement age. I think that's going to happen for future
I think that's going to
recipients.
happen regardless.
Yeah, and it probably should, because we're in an era now where used to anybody born prior to 1960, they had a different full retirement age.
Correct.
Everybody, Teresa and my 25-year-old son, full retirement age right now is 67. So for the younger generation, whose life expectancy is likely going to be longer than ours,
yes,
I think it makes sense to raise it from 67 to 68 or 69, and that would solve a lot of the stress. I think it's going to come down to this. The solve is probably going to be a mix of things regardless, but what party is in power when 2032 arrives, who's the president, what party has dominance of Congress, that's going to determine how the fix gets done. But I think we are in agreement that it will get done.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So we went a little long on the What's Happening segment, but some good stuff in there. Thanks to our marketing team for fishing that out for us. That is going to do it for the What's Happening segment. Stay tuned now. The Get Ready for the Future show is next.
You've been sold the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
On a mission to help people discover, protect, and share true financial independence. That's why we exist at GenWealth Financial Advisors, and it's why we do this program. The Get Ready for the Future show is all about you and your questions, and hopefully our efforts are to give you some education and maybe even some action steps that will be a catalyst to you toward your journey to true financial independence. Glad to have you along for the next half hour or so. My name is Scott Inman. I'm an advisor in the West Little Rock office, which is where we are doing the show, as we always do. In fact, right behind this great set is my office. I mean, I literally have to walk.
You have a little bit better commute than me for this.
Yes, my commute's 12 steps. Yours is about 30 minutes from the Conway office. Teresa Arrigo alongside co-hosting today. Thanks for coming. Thanks for making that long commute.
Oh, you're very
I think
welcome.
you were here already
I come here
anyway.
on this day anyway. Yeah.
That's right.
I'm here every Wednesday and
so
a lot
we just
of other days
roped
too.
you in. We roped you in. You ready to go?
Yes.
All right, Julio from Bryant has our first question today. We've saved well, but we're overwhelmed with investment options. How do we simplify without losing performance? That's a great question from Julio. I think complexity doesn't always mean better. Simplifying is important. I think we can get really bogged down looking at things and thinking this investment is going to do better than that investment. This asset class is where I want to be versus this asset class. I think the first thing I would ask, Julio, I think it's great you want to get simplified. We don't know how old you are, right? So when it comes to simplifying but still getting performance, it really matters how old you are, because we build everything from an investment strategy process here at GenWealth around your time horizon.
Yes, and I think your time horizon drives your goals and your objectives to a degree as well. And I'm not saying your time horizon as in like one number, right? You're going to hit retirement at a certain age, but that doesn't mean that all of your money needs to mature or be in a particular portfolio at that point. So the time horizon is, when are you going to need the funds? Talking about the different investments that you have or the different assets that you have. Also, in that time horizon, there's probably a little bit of a blend if you're married. If you have a spouse that we're dealing with, that time horizon can be two different numbers on those assets. And I think for a lot of people, you've heard this, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And so you feel like you have to do this overly complicated process. I don't think that's true. I always say you can put them all in the same farm, just don't put them all in the same animals.
Right. Yeah, and when you think about that, also the values of these accounts matter.
Yes.
You know, if you're just starting out, and you know, these aren't going to be exact numbers, but let's say you haven't built $100,000 of wealth yet, it doesn't make sense to spread that too thinly. You can find some good growth, especially if you have a long-term time horizon. We're going to assume you're young in this scenario. You have an opportunity to get it into one or two funds, and they're really good growth funds, and they're going to do great over a long period of time. And then as you get those values to higher levels, that's when I think it matters for you to get some help, work with a professional, and get maybe a managed portfolio where you have some eyes on it at all times, and protect it a little bit more, because you don't want to give back everything you've accumulated. Nobody wants to do that. And if you're getting closer to retirement, so let's assume Julio for a minute is getting close to retirement, that's when diversification matters even more, because the downturn that is inevitably going to come in the market at some point during either your pre-retirement years or your retirement years could really crater your retirement income. And that's what we're talking about here. You have to, when you talk about saving well, you have to identify, why am I saving well? And most of the time people will tell you for retirement, but we don't really know what that means. We don't know what we need to accumulate. And certainly we don't understand what kind of income that could provide.
And I think that's the key, is a lot of people don't realize that retirement is an income problem, not an asset problem. So if you're purely focused on assets, it can put you down a path that may not make sense for you. The other thing I would say that tends to happen is people think that they're very well diversified because they've got, you know, a portfolio over here at the employer, they've got a portfolio over here with an advisor, they've got something at the bank, and nobody's looking at all of it at one time. I've had someone come in and every single one of their accounts was similarly invested. So even though they thought they were well diversified because they had this advisor over here doing some diversification and that one over there, they actually had the same funds at every provider. And so they weren't well diversified, and they were really close to retirement and didn't have a strategy that was cohesive because they didn't have one person looking at all of the pieces.
Yeah, that's a great point. And because I do think people think that way. And I think too, you can have multiple funds, even with one advisor, that all really have the same stocks and underlying in that fund. So it is important to work with an advisor and have some basic understanding of what do I own and why do I own it. And I think at GenWealth, that's part of the education process. We reach different levels of that. Some people don't want to know much. There's a trust factor there that says I just want to.
Or just a lack of interest.
Yeah, or a lack of interest. I just want to, look at my statement every once in a while, make sure everything's going well, make sure I've got the income I need, and you guys are going to take care of it. But we are here for someone who wants to understand at a deeper level, to tell you this is why we are doing this. In fact, we write it down. This is why we are doing what we're doing, to accomplish a goal, not just to try to reach diversification for the sake of diversification.
And we've hired a chief investment officer who evaluates all of our portfolios to make sure that they all work together, to make sure, again, we don't have the same investment just with a different name in a bunch of different portfolios. So it's important that you have somebody coaching you on that, because you're absolutely correct. It's overwhelming. Before I joined this team, I wouldn't have been able to look at a statement and know what I'm seeing. They all have these weird names and jargon that nobody outside of our industry uses. I couldn't go to your job and know all the language that you use there. So it's not uncommon to feel overwhelmed by this. But having somebody to help you evaluate that and make sure that they're, have a quarterback who's kind of carrying the ball for you would be really beneficial.
Hey, if you want more free information about retirement, investments, and your money, want to invite you to search for GenWealth Financial Advisors on YouTube and subscribe there to our YouTube channel. If you're listening to the Get Ready for the Future show on podcast or on radio, you may not realize that there's actually a streaming version of the Get Ready for the Future show, and there's also lots of other educational resources there. So go to YouTube and look for GenWealth Financial Advisors and subscribe to our YouTube channel to get more information. Love this next question from Crystal. She sent in a text message and writes, my employer just added a Mega Backdoor Roth option. What is that, and should I use it? What a great name. I want that Mega Backdoor Roth option. What is that? So most people probably never heard of the Mega Backdoor Roth, and many people have probably not even ever heard of our backdoor Roth. So we will draw a distinction at some point. But let's start with the Mega Backdoor Roth, because this is really only available to someone as an option if they have this in their employer plan. So basically, this is how it works. In 2026, we'll use these maximum contribution limits. The standard employee 401k deferral limit is $23,500, or it's $31,000 if you're 50 or older, and there's even a super catch-up in there if you're 60 to 63. But basically, that's roundabout the amount of employee contributions that you can make. But the total 401k contribution limit, this is the all-in, counting your match as well, that you can put into the 401k is actually $70,000. That's a lot. That's a big gap.
It's a big gap.
77.5 actually if you're 50 and over and qualify for the catch-up. So if you are contributing the most you can contribute to a 401k, an employer can offer the option for further after-tax contributions. So you can't put any more than that pre-tax. That's not going to happen. But after-tax contributions, meaning the money that you're putting in there has to be taxed first, you can put that money into the same 401k, and it's an after-tax account. And we see this all the time, Teresa, when we do rollovers for clients, when they roll those funds over to an IRA. Many times they didn't even know they had it.
Yes.
And oftentimes it's not a whole lot of money, but there is a little after-tax account sitting over there that they've contributed to over time. And usually what we will do is we will roll that into a Roth IRA. And that's
Correct.
what the Mega Backdoor Roth really is. But if you do that for years,
Yes, it could add up.
Yes. So talk a little bit more about that.
I mean, you do have to have the wiggle room to be able to do that financially, because again, these are after-tax dollars, so you're not getting the tax benefits when you add to that portion of the funds. So you want to make sure you're prepared for the tax impact of doing that, because you're not taking those dollars home, you're also getting taxed on them. So it is important to know that your employer has to have the option to do it. So your employer may offer a Roth option inside there, but this is nuanced. This is not Roth, but it's also after tax. So if your employer doesn't offer the after tax non-Roth option, then this isn't going to be available to you. Make sure that that's there. And then also, if it has in-service withdrawals or in-plan Roth conversions, you do have some options to move traditional money, pre-tax money, into the Roth option as well. It's just a little different. Again, your limit, you can put as much as you want, but again, you got to prepare for those taxes. Taxes are kind of the big thing when it comes to Roth in general. You're paying taxes now, so you don't have to pay them later. And the more time you have for it to grow, the more it makes sense. So, you know, in general, Crystal, if you're close to retirement, this may or may not make sense to do for you. It depends on your bigger picture. But if you're younger, if you're in your 30s, 40s, even early 50s, and you've got some time for it to grow tax deferred, that may be a little bit of magical for you when it comes to retirement.
Yeah, because it allows you to potentially put far beyond the standard Roth IRA limit in there. So I think tax-free money in retirement is a great thing to acquire, because it creates so much flexibility for you in retirement that I do think it's worth looking into. Now, I will say at the same time that when you hear Mega Backdoor Roth, I think we should spend just a moment talking about just what a backdoor Roth is. Because if this is the mega, then there's the non-mega backdoor Roth, right? And that's a little bit different, and it certainly applies very sparingly to people. But what the backdoor Roth, it is for people, for the most part. We wouldn't recommend it for anybody that already has traditional IRA dollars, okay? But if you have all of your money in either non-retirement accounts and or 401k accounts, and you don't really have any IRA dollars, what you can do, and this is only even necessary if you make too much money to contribute directly to a Roth IRA. So a lot of people don't realize that. Matter of fact, I had a client once that came in and was still contributing to a Roth IRA at another advisor at another firm, and hadn't communicated with that advisor for a while. and her income had gone up significantly. She had gotten a significant raise, and that was the first thing I spotted was you're not really supposed to be doing this, contributing to a Roth IRA because you make too much money. So if you are ineligible because of your income to directly contribute to a Roth IRA, then what you can do if you don't have any IRA dollars, and actually you can do it if you
it's
do.
Just a little
but
messy.
This gets
from
messy.
a tax standpoint.
Then you can put those dollars into a traditional IRA and then convert it to a Roth. Now, taxation taxes are due on the gains, but if you don't invest the money and convert it right away, there are no gains. So it's a great option.
It works best, like you said. I want to be clear, when you say traditional IRAs, for those that may not understand terminology, your employer plan doesn't count.
Right.
So it's just things held away from your employer as a pre-tax account, pre-tax IRA account. But if you were to make the contribution and immediately convert it, there's no gains, so it's completely tax-free if you meet all the requirements there. But Roth can be so powerful if you let it grow long-term. That's why if you don't qualify to do this directly, it's certainly something to consider. There's usually going to be some cost at the provider, so LPL does charge a fee to convert funds from traditional to Roth. It's really manageable.
Yep.
So I do have a lot of people that I work with whose income is too high for direct Roth contributions, but they still want to make them. This is the method we use.
Yeah. So I would say in both cases, I would work with a financial advisor to execute these things, because I think it's interesting on the Mega Backdoor Roth when the question was, my employer added the Mega Backdoor Roth option. The first thing I thought about was, well, they probably added an after-tax option for you.
Correct.
Can you do the Mega Backdoor Roth in the employer plan? Because I haven't actually seen that. We may have had plans come in where it was available, but I hadn't seen anybody do it, right?
I haven't seen it in a plan document yet, because a lot of times when I'm working with clients who have an employer plan, I'll spend some time going through their summary plan document to look for different options in there. I haven't seen it locally. Doesn't mean it's not there. It just may not have been in the ones I've reviewed.
Yeah. So great option for your employer plan. If you want to look, if you're not Crystal, you're somebody else thinking about that. If you want to check with your employer if it's an option, and then work with a financial advisor to execute whether it's a Mega Backdoor or it's a non-Mega Backdoor Roth.
We always got to give it these dramatic names.
I love it. I love the name of it. It certainly makes it sound like magic. It's not magic, but it is a great option if you can do it. Hey, this is the question of the week. We want to congratulate Crystal for being named the question of the week, and we're going to send her the now famous Get Ready for the Future Show tumbler. I think I've got 30 of them at my house I need to bring back to the office.
Yeah, you do. I don't have a single one.
I sneak out with them. Sorry about that. We're going to send you the free tumbler for being the question of the week. Please email us to claim it. Send it to show@getreadyforthefuture.com. Joey from Lone Oak is next on the Get Ready for the Future show. We'd like to travel internationally in retirement. How do we budget for that without draining our savings? Great aspiration, Joey. I want to do the same thing, by the way. And we have a lot of clients that do that. But I think it's a great question. How do we budget for that without draining our savings? And, the first thing is you have to kind of quantify your international travel. How often do you want to do this? You want one big trip a year, multiple shorter trips, something closer to a slow travel lifestyle where you spend months abroad? So that dramatically changes the income you need. So it's got to become an income equation. And I know you want some spontaneity in that. I mean, I love that. My phrase is planned spontaneity. I want to plan well so that I can be spontaneous because I have that freedom to do it. But I think identifying that, Joey, and you say we, so I'm sure there's a spouse involved here, is the first step of that. Let's assume you've done that. The next question I would have you built a retirement income plan overall, landscaping how you turn your assets into income and know how much that's going to provide, covering basic expenses and then other discretionary income that you may want outside of the travel, because that's a big piece of this.
Yes, we had a client who came in and they were wanting to have a lot of money for travel, and their plan was to retire early because they did have really solid assets. But when we looked at their income need and what it was going to take for their travel expenses, we had to reevaluate a little bit. And by waiting just a couple more years, they had way more income potential and were able to facilitate that. Now, just looking from the outside in, you would have said, oh, they're wealthy, they'll be fine. But when you looked at the actual data, it was just missing the mark just a little bit. So I encourage you to take the time to really build your income plan to see what your assets can support first, and then determine if that's enough to facilitate what you want. There are certain places that are less expensive to travel than others. So that's why, like Scott said, it's really important to understand where you're going to go and do a little bit of price shopping now. Because at least gives you a baseline of what to look for later.
And we talked about inflation in another segment. That shows up in travel for sure. That's going to go up over time. So you have to have those inflation-adjusted raises to your income. But let's say you have built that retirement income plan and you know you've got some margin there, either in assets or income. I think there's where the choice comes in, and it's probably a preference more than it is anything. But if you have a robust withdrawal strategy, because I think that's important to have, you may not need all of those dollars, but our clients take their income monthly in almost all cases, and they may be taking a little more than they need, and they may, over an annual or couple of year time frame, accumulate a good sized cash bucket that can do those once in a lifetime trips, those every other year trips, or those once a year trips. So you may be taking it out before you need it, but within the realm of your retirement income plan and staying in the tax bracket that you need to stay in, I think it makes sense, and it really goes into the broader conversation here, Teresa, of having a withdrawal strategy in place that is robust enough to manage what's coming later in retirement, like RMDs and Medicare premium increases.
Yes, and we have some clients who are kind of doing the opposite, where we know how much they can spend per year, but they don't need it month to month. And so they're just letting it sit and grow. And then they pull it. We keep it in something very conservative, of course, but that allows them to pull it when they need it, as opposed to getting taxed on it month to month. But we also are being important or very strategic. You know, we have an understanding of their tax situation, so we're not going to let them take $50,000 in a single year for that one trip. We're going to plan ahead for that by moving some assets maybe to an after-tax account to reinvest while we wait for that big trip that they're planning for. So we're meeting annually, we're talking about their goals, we're making sure that it was planned for in advance. That's the key. It has to be like a line item in your budget, as opposed to something you just spur of the moment decide. Now, on the flip side, I did have a client come in recently that said, I've just gotten an opportunity to potentially go to Germany. Is it even possible? And thankfully we have the tools to be able to go, well, let's look at the impact and make an educated decision for them on those things that come up that maybe you weren't planning for.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I would have liked to see under the hood on that one.
It was good.
Is he going to be able to go?
Oh, yeah. He was able to. And I'll tell you, in the past, we didn't have the same tools we have now. And I would just have to kind of estimate based on, are we ahead in the plan? Are we running tight in the plan? Whereas now I can say, okay, this decision today equals this many dollars later. Is it worth it to you? Yeah.
A couple other notes on the international travel. Medicare does not cover you internationally. Most people don't know that. So a Medicare supplement plan that includes foreign travel emergency coverage or a standalone travel health policy would be essential there. So another final closing thought on that question. We have time for one more. Frank from Bentonville, he writes, I'm helping my parents with finances now that they're in their 80s. What should I be watching for legally and financially? Well, we applaud you, Frank, for doing that and watching out for your parents, because we do know, in fact, when it comes to trainings for us as a financial advisor, one of the most common trainings that we get is to be more aware of the fraud and the spam and the phishing and all of the things that are going on when it comes to the elderly. They are targeted. They are targets. There is a definitely sinister element of our society that is trying to steal from elderly people and counting on their cognitive skills declining as they get older. So having a son or daughter or someone who is their advocate that works with them is key. So when it comes to the legal part of that, Teresa, there are a lot of things that Frank can do to be that advocate in the best way.
Yes, I think the first two things to look at, Frank, are getting power of attorney so that you can step in financially to help as needed. If something were to happen and there was a fraud, for instance, you could step in and help advocate for them. The other would be their health care power of attorney. I've been the child who had to make health care decisions for a parent, and it was hard. I didn't know what he wanted, and he couldn't speak for himself. So I would encourage you to have that conversation and put those documents in place, because even if you know what your parents want, if you don't have the permission to tell, then it doesn't matter. So make sure you've got that. Make sure you've got the healthcare power of attorney and the financial power of attorney. And then also, it's time to have a conversation about whether their estate plan is in order.
Yeah.
Because I've lived that too, where, parent was gone. I'm having to figure out what they wanted done with all of their assets. They had a small handwritten will. And it was a really, really difficult process. It was very hard on our family. So if they don't have that in place now, it would be worth it to you, even if you have to cover the expense of it, to go ahead and get that in place so that you know exactly what they want done when they're no longer here, and you can make sure to execute those decisions for them.
You mentioned the conversation. I think it's so common for parents not to really discuss the details of their finances with their kids and even their adult kids. It's just something that's kind of, I don't know if it's taboo or if it's just, and I don't think it even really relates to, I don't want them to know about it. It's just not something that they want to go over with their kids for whatever reason. So knowing where the accounts are, the bank accounts, the investment accounts, pension income if there is, Social Security amounts and how that gets paid, any annuities or insurance policies, you should have a written inventory of what your parents have and why they have it.
And we did create a document for one of our Enrich events a while back. So if you want to reach out at info@getreadyforthefuture and ask for this document, it basically just allows your parent to create that inventory. I think we called it the Sharing Financial Independence with Your Loved Ones document. If you want to send info@getreadyforthefuture.com a request for that document, we can send that. There are parents who are not ready to do power of attorney or medical power of attorney. I get that. But if they can at least get organized, that'll help you know what to do if the worst happens and you're having to get all this together.
We've got a couple of minutes left, but another one that I think is critical is, do you know if your parents have long-term care insurance coverage? And if you do, you need to understand how it works, because if they're in their 80s and if they are on their way to cognitive decline, or if a health event incapacitates them, you'll need to know how to trigger that policy and get those benefits. You don't want to be without that. If they've paid those premiums all these years and they have a robust way to pay for long-term care, a nursing home or assisted living, whatever form that takes, you need to understand that on the front end before a health event happens. And if there's no long-term care coverage in place, you should certainly assess what in-home care, assisted living, and memory care can actually cost in your area, because Medicare does not cover long-term care. So that's something that you really need to be aware of is maybe they have a financial advisor, and if they don't, get them to one so they have a plan for long-term care. We always address it and plan for it. There's got to be some plan in place, because the statistics tell us 70% of us will need some sort of care. And I know he's probably thinking about that, since he's trying to take care of his parents in the 80s, in their 80s. But I think that's a big piece to this as well.
I think if you don't have a plan in advance, then you're stuck trying to just figure it out as you go. And that is, when you're trying to make decisions under the wire like that, it limits your options. So I understand that having these conversations is hard, but I'll tell you right now, if my parents had known how easy it would have made my life to have these conversations earlier, they would have done it. It would have been the most loving thing they could have done. And my parents were always looking out for me. So I don't know that they knew. And I think there's a big misconception in our country in general about how these things work when you're incapacitated or when you're no longer here.
All right, I'm going to leave it in your wheelhouse there. It's time for the final thoughts.
Okay. I am so thankful that we at GenWealth have partnered with wealth.com, and we have someone on our team that can do estate planning, guide you through that process. Her name's Murray Tudor. If you don't have an estate plan in place, or your parents don't have one in place, I would encourage you to reach out to our team and schedule some time with her to see if it makes sense for you, because the cost of doing it is very manageable, and a lot of people don't realize just how beneficial it would be.
Yeah, I would echo that. I've sat in on a few of those meetings, been a part of them, and it is a peace of mind that people walk away with when they have that full estate plan in place. We talked about a few components to it: the financial power of attorney, the healthcare directive, the trust is the big piece to that.
Yes.
Knowing where the assets are going to go and how they are going to be distributed after your parents pass away. And it's great when you have multi-generations in there. Doesn't happen all that often, but if you can have that part in your case, where you have parents in your 80s and you're trying to take care of them, that's a great piece as well. And I would definitely encourage you to go through that process. schedule an appointment with our in-house estate planning. She's also in-state, by the way. She lives here.
Is.
In-house estate planning specialist. She'd love to help you walk through the estate planning process. And I would close with this, as I always do. If you're hearing something today that kind of sparks an interest that you'd like to know more, you need to go through the planning process. I want to encourage you to walk through it with us. The GenWealth Ready to Retire process is accessible to you. The first appointment absolutely complimentary. All you have to do is call to set that appointment, 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. Or email us, send it to info@getreadyforthefuture.com. And that is all the time we have for this week's show. I want to thank you for being a part of the Get Ready for the Future show. And we want you to send in a question. If something's on your mind, send it to 501-381-5228. You can text it or you can leave a voicemail. Hope you'll join us again next week. See you then.
The GenWealth financial team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and GenWealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.